Kremlin wanted to project strength. Instead, the West saw caution, fear, and a leader under pressure. One of the eve of Russia's most symbolic military celebration, something unexpected happened. US President Donald Trump announced a sudden 3-day ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine. And at the exact same moment, when Putin was preparing one of the quietest Victory Day parade Russia has been in many years, no giant columns of tanks, no overwhelming display of military hardware, fewer world leaders, restricted media access, heavy security everywhere. For a parade designed to showcase Russia's power, the atmosphere felt very different. This is the story behind the muted victory parade that exposed the pressure building around the Kremlin. For decades, Victory Day has been sacred in Russia. Every year on 9th May, Red Square transforms into a state of military pride. Massive missile systems roll through Moscow. Fighter jets scream across the skies. Thousands of troops march in perfect formation. Foreign dignitaries arrive from around the world. The parade is more than just a celebration of the Soviet Union victory over Nazi Germany in the World War II. It is a political theater, a global message, a reminder that Russia sees itself as a military superpower. And no leader has used this symbolism more aggressively than Vladimir Putin. For years, Putin turned Victory Day into a showcase of Russian dominance. The cameras, the weapons, the nationalism, the image of total control. But this year, that image cracked. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, military hardware will not be displayed due to what officials call the current operational situation. That short phrase speaks volumes, because behind those words is a reality Moscow does not want the world to fully see. Ukraine's drone attacks have intensified deep inside Russian territory. Oil refineries has been hit repeatedly. Critical infrastructure has been targeted, and for the first time in years, even Moscow itself has begun to feel vulnerable. Earlier this week, a Ukrainian drone reportedly struck a luxury apartment building in western Moscow. There was no casualties, but symbolically, the message was enormous. The war is no longer far away. It is reaching the Russian capital. And suddenly, the Kremlin's greatest concern became security, not the spectacle. Around Moscow, anti-aircraft systems appeared near key locations. Mobile internet restrictions were introduced. Text messaging disruptions were warned about. Foreign journalists were quietly blocked from attending the parade. Even major international networks were told at the last minute that access has been revoked. Instead, coverage would merely come from Russian state media. That decision alone revealed how sensitive the situation had become. Because when government restrictions cameras, they usually fear what cameras might capture. Political analysts say this smaller parade sends a message Putin would normally avoid at all costs. Sam Greeny, a professor of Russian politics at King's College London, described it as deeply unusual. Putin's political identity has always been built around the appearance of strength and control. But a scaled-back parade suggests something else: concern, pressure, possibly even fear. And then came the announcement that changed everything. On Friday, Donald Trump revealed that Russia and Ukraine has agreed to a temporary 3-day ceasefire from 9th May to 11th May. The deal reportedly includes a pause in fighting and a massive prisoner exchange. 1,000 prisoners from each side, 1,000 families potentially reunited. Both Moscow and Kiev confirmed the agreement and the arrangement. Ukrainian President Zelensky said the lives of Ukrainian prisoners mattered more than whatever happened on a Red Square. That statement carried weight, because while Putin prepared a carefully controlled parade, Zelensky focused the world's attention to human lives, not military symbolism. And the timing could not have been more dramatic. The ceasefire announcement landed just as Russia prepared for its biggest patriotic event of the year. Suddenly, global headlines were no longer about tanks in Moscow. They were about negotiations, prisoner exchange, and possibility, however temporary, of reduced fighting. For Putin, that created a strange contrast. But this year, Russia entered the celebration surrounded by questions. Questions about the war, questions about the economy, questions about security, questions about how much pressure the Kremlin is truly facing behind closed doors. Inside Russia, the mood also appears to be changing. CNN spoke with several residents in Moscow, and many expressed exhaustion over the ongoing conflict. One resident, identified only as Mikhail, and said something striking. "It's already time for the war to end." He talked about people dying, financial struggles, and growing restrictions affecting daily life. Those comments reflect something increasingly important: public figure. At the beginning of the conflict, patriotic messaging dominated Russian media, but after years of war, economic strain, sanctions, and rising insecurity, cracks are appearing in public sentiment. Even some Russians displaying patriotic symbols admitted that hope the war ends soon. Galina, a woman from Russia-occupied Donbass, visiting Moscow, wore the famous black and orange St. George ribbon, one of Russia's strongest military symbols. Yet, even she said, "War is bad for everyone." That sentence may summarize the emotional reality now spreading across both sides of the conflict. Meanwhile, international politics continue to raise the stakes. Unlike previous Victory Day celebrations attended by leaders such as Xi Jinping, this year's guest list was noticeably smaller. Among the leaders attending were Belarus President, Malaysia King, and the President of Toglon. But the absence of a broader global participation was difficult to ignore. Even Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico reportedly planned bilateral talks with Putin while avoiding attendance at the parade itself. The detail matters politically because optics are everything at events like these. And this year, the optics are complicated. On the side, Russia still wants to project resilience. On the other side, the security measures reveal deep concern about potential attacks and instability. According to political analyst Nina Kravchevira, the Kremlin has become increasingly paranoid about leadership security. She pointed to global events where leaders face unrest, attacks, and instability. Then add the constant wave of Ukrainian drone strikes. The result, a Russian leadership operating under growing pressure, and that pressure became visible everywhere around Victory Day preparations. Even before Trump's ceasefire announcement, tensions were escalating rapidly. Russia and Ukraine had already accused each other of violating previous ceasefire. Russian officials warned foreign embassies to evacuate personnel from Kiev if attacks targeted the Moscow parade. The rhetoric was escalating dangerously. Some feared major retaliation strikes could occur during the celebrations. Then suddenly, the ceasefire changed the atmosphere. For a brief moment, the possibility of escalation was replaced with cautious restraint. But nobody believed the deeper conflict is resolved. This war has transformed Europe's security landscape. It has reshaped NATO. It has altered global energy markets. And it has created one of the most dangerous geopolitical confrontations of the modern era. Which is why this year's muted victory parade matters for beyond Moscow. Because symbolism matters in politics. And symbols often reveal truth governments try to hide. The smaller parade, the reduced military display, the restricted media access, the anti-aircraft defenses across Moscow, all of it point toward a reality that is becoming harder to ignore. The war is placing enormous pressure on Russia internally. And even though the Kremlin still projects confidence publicly, the atmosphere surrounding this year's victory parade tells a more complicated story. A story of caution instead of celebration, security instead of spectacle, anxiety instead of strength. At the same time, Donald Trump's ceasefire announcement introduced a completely new dimension of the conflict. If the ceasefire holds, even temporarily, it could open the door for a larger negotiations later. But if it collapses quickly, the world could return to escalation within days. And that uncertainty now hangs over both Moscow and Kiev. As crowds gather in Red Square, as soldiers march beneath the Kremlin walls, as cameras focus on Putin, one caution quietly lingers in the background. Is this still a display of power, or a carefully controlled attempt to hide vulnerability? Because for the first time in years, Russia's Victory Day parade is not being remembered for overwhelming strength. It is being remembered for what was missing: the tanks, the spectacle, the confidence. And in global politics, sometimes what disappears says more than what remains. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more deep geopolitical analysis, world conflict updates, and powerful global stories explained with clarity and detail. Because the world is changing fast and every symbol matters. Peace be upon you. Thank you.